Glad that you ventured the Arctic conditions to be here. Thanks for being here. Had people who were calling this week going, please, can we have Wednesday night? Please, can we have Wednesday night? I was like, that's going to depend on the roads. And then we're like, okay, yeah, we'll meet on Wednesday night. And then my phone starts pulling up going, well, I'm not going to be there on Wednesday night. Like, okay, whatever. So we're glad that you're here. If you're watching online, thanks for being here online. We're going to be in James chapter 2 tonight, if you want to turn over there. But we've been talking about James as being kind of the Sermon on the Mount in action. What James does is he's kind of riffing off of Jesus's famous sermon in Matthew's gospel. And I will tell you that I've got friends, I've even got family members who are traveling preachers. And I will tell you that if they've got a sermon that really connects with people, they will preach it in every town. Different crowds. So we have Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospels where you get a lot of it. You get it in a little bit of a different format in Luke, and I think what that is representing is where each group heard it. Because I have no doubt that Jesus will go from town to town and he's preaching, and it's not a new sermon every time. Yeah, there's new teachings. Yeah, there's new applications when people ask him questions. But I really think the bulk of what he's sharing is what we would call the Sermon on the Mount. And so I think what James, his brother, is doing is taking some of Jesus' most popular, most well-known teachings and saying, look, you heard Jesus say this. Here's how you live it out in your community. Now, he's writing to a broad group of people who are scattered all over the place, but they're largely Jewish followers of Jesus that are scattered. And again, keep in mind, James's writing is probably the earliest New Testament writing we have. It's the closest to the ministry of Jesus that we have. And so what we've looked at over the last couple of weeks here is that the beginning of James, believers should view trials as opportunities for growth. Again, consider it pure joy when you face trials because it produces perseverance. And so, again, we can look at things in our life and go, oh, that's not going the way it is. Oh, how awful. Or we can look at this and say, you know what? I could learn from the Lord in this. I could grow closer to the Lord in this. And again, I would love to say I handle it that way every time, but I don't. Something happens like, and then I have to kind of remember, oh yeah, Jesus said there'd be days like this. Fear not, he's overcome the world. And so maybe we can learn to be a little bit more like him through those moments. We learn that God generously gives us wisdom. Ask for wisdom. Keep asking for it. And if you feel like you don't have it, ask for it again. Because the more you ask, the more he's willing to give. Again, just from personal experience, I look at some things that I used to consider good, and I look at it now, and maybe that's age, I don't know, but I've also been praying for wisdom a lot between now and then. So, again, ask God for wisdom. He's more than happy to give it to you. Again, our endurance grows through our trials, and that brings us a blessing that we go through these trials, we start learning what works and what doesn't work. We start learning what God wants and what God doesn't want. And so, again, when we face hardships of many kinds, we ought to look for the growth in it. We learn that God is constantly good. He's not a God that changes and flip-flops all over the place. And so, he's not blessing you one day and then tempting you the next day. Again, he's providing opportunities for us to grow our faith. The world is a broken and messed up place until you encounter broken and messed up situations. But God is faithful through it all. We learned a little bit in chapter 1 that true faith is active faith. In other words, faith has verbs. Our faith should be on display. We're going to get into that a lot tonight because James kind of circles back around. James is really good about kind of saying these little things and you're like, ooh, that's good, and then he comes back around a little bit later and elaborates on it. So he's going to elaborate on that quite a bit tonight. We also looked last week at the royal law. We love our neighbors as ourselves, and that's what we should do. And then the whole thing of favoritism in that church where people were coming in, and if they were rich and powerful, oh, come down here. We got the good seat for you. Hey, you're kind of dressed kind of scruffy. Sit back there, And so again, we talked about practical reasons, practical things in our life that sort of make us do that. So again, tonight we are in James, and we're kind of dealing with this idea faith in action, of faith living that out. Danny, can you pull up the next slide, please? Because I forgot what I titled this. What real faith looks like. And so James is going to be talking about faith and what does our life look like if we're truly living out the faith that we have in Jesus Christ. But to get that started, the thing I keep forgetting to do every week is put this slide in here. I would like for you to turn to somebody near you and answer this question. What is something that you're always saying you will do, you always intend to do, something you say you're going to do, but you struggle with actually following through on it? Something you always say you're going to do, but then you actually struggle with following through on it. What is that? All right, something you say you're going to do, but you struggle with. I heard working out a minute ago. I'm on that one. That was on my kick for the new year. I started it yesterday. I didn't get out of January, so I'm still claiming it. Reading your Bible, right? How many of us go, hey, I'm going to read through the Bible this year, and Genesis, woo, Exodus, oh yeah, Leviticus, nope, I'm out. we tend to do that, right? So yeah, that's a good one. Others? I thought I saw a hand back here. Was it Bible? Yep, yeah. Other things we struggle with doing that we want to do it, we say we're going to do it, and then it just kind of falls apart.
Organization and getting rid of things.
Organizing and getting rid of things. I feel attacked. I feel attacked on that one. Oh, yeah, Yep, I'm working on cleaning out my garage. It's been 6 years in the process now. Yes, ma'am. Serving in the community. I want to get involved. I want to start these things, and it's just never quite get off the ground. Yeah. Learning a new language. Absolutely. Yeah. There's apps I've put on my phone to do that, and it just, and again, we intend well to do it, right? This is something we want to do. But let's be honest, if I really want to do it, I'll make it happen. If I kind of want to do it, if it works out, Somebody was commenting earlier, and they said that they like the bald look on me, like when I keep my hair trimmed short. And I said, well, I always intend to do this. But I'll look at myself in the mirror and go, whew, I need to cut my hair. But I'm not willing to sit still long enough to have my hair cut. It gets shaggy. So when I was younger, it looked better. Okay, never mind. Self-conscious because I was asked about my hair right before coming out here. Okay, so we're going to be in James chapter 2, if you want to turn over there. And again, last week we looked at the first half of James 2. Tonight we're going to be looking at the second half of James chapter 2. And we're going to be there in just, I totally forgot what I was going to do here. If we have time, I need a volunteer. If we have time, we may not have time. If we have time, remind me of Matthew 17. Matthew 17. Or just say Matthew, and I will hopefully, I probably won't, but I'll hopefully remember what I was going to do there. All right, so James chapter 2, as soon as I get my Bible turned over there, and we are going to be in verse 14 to get started with. There we go. James writes, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith, but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." So I had a conversation with somebody earlier today, and they were asking some questions about church history and various things. And the topic came over to Martin Luther. Not Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther, the guy that he was named after. Anybody know Martin Luther? Okay, that's about what I'm guessing. Is I get a couple of, yeah. First trunk or treat here, I came dressed as Martin Luther because he nailed his arguments to the door of the Wittenberg Chapel on October 31st. So I came dressed as Martin Luther for that, and like everybody was like, what are you? I'm like, okay, never mind. Martin Luther, he was a reformer. Basically, he wasn't trying to start his own church. He wasn't trying to break away, but in his studying of the Bible, he started looking at what the church was doing that was just normal, and he came around, he said, my Bible kind of gives me a different idea about that. And he was told, shut up. Don't look at that. Just don't pay attention to that. Just do what we say. And he goes, yeah, but shouldn't we be doing what God says? And so he wasn't trying to cause a fuss. He wasn't trying to be angry. He was just wanting to have a Bible study. And so he found 95 things. He was like, you know what? I don't agree with what we're saying about these things. And one of the big issues was that at that time, the church as a whole would say stuff like, well, that was really bad. But, if you make a donation to the church, we'll forgive you. Or, you know what? If you do enough good work, God will forgive you. So there kind of became this system of it really doesn't matter what you do. You can do whatever you want to do, but as long as you do enough good stuff over here, well, it all balances out. And so Luther's response to that was like, no. And he looks at Acts and he looks at some texts in his Bible and he says, look, we are saved by faith. That's a big argument in Acts chapter 15. They're saved by faith just like we are. And then he came to James and he reads that faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. Faith ought to have verbs. And when Martin Luther translated the Bible into German, he almost left the book of James out. He called it a right strawy book. Strange, because we're saved by faith, and James makes it sound like we're saved by doing stuff, which sounded like the abuse of the church at that time. Now, what James is saying is not you're going to work your way to heaven or anything like that. What he's saying is a saving faith. If you actually believe something, if you actually want to do something, what are you going to do? You're going to get it done. If I actually, really, truly want to eat healthy, what am I going to do? I'm going to change my diet. If I actually, really, truly want to learn a new language, what am I going to do? I'm going to learn a new language. But just like all those resolutions that we tend to break, sometimes we go, yeah, I believe, and then what do? Nothing. Now think about James's church in its context. You're being persecuted for following Jesus. How easy is it to say, I follow Jesus, and let nobody know? Your life looks just like everybody else because it's comfortable and it's easy and nobody's going to question you. Nobody's going to make fun of you. Nobody's going to call you names. Nobody's going to not be your friend. And into that, James says, faith without living it, it's not faith. It's not real. Can such faith save you? What answer does that sound like James is expecting? Probably not, because it's not faith. Just saying something and not actually embracing it with your life, yeah, that's not good. He continues in verse 18 and he goes, well, some people are going to make the argument, you have faith, I have deeds. In other words, I don't have to believe and I'll do good stuff and it'll all work out. Others say, well, I believe, but I don't have to do good stuff and it'll all work out. Picking one side or the other of the argument without the whole. He goes, how does that work out? Well, show me your faith without your deeds. Now, how easy is that to do? How can you show somebody you believe without actually doing something in faith? Again, weird, random sermon things that get stuck in my head from childhood. I remember This was around the time that the Berlin Wall fell. Around that time. And I remember this whole harping on communism and then there was this thing, if the communists took over today and they had been filming you for months and put you on trial for being a Christian, could they convict you? Could they play back that video and have enough evidence to convict you of being a Christian? Or would they see nothing out of the ordinary from every other person? Now, whether that sermon was, well, I'm sure it was well intended, but whether it was a great sermon or not, I don't know. But that imagery is always stuck in my head. If the world watches you and they have no idea you're a Christian, are you actually a Christian? There's an old song we sing sometimes, and they'll know we are Christians by our silent thoughts in our head. No, they'll know it by our verbs, by what we do, by our actions, by the way that we love people, by the way that we interact with people, by the way that we live out our faith. And so again, James is saying, show me your faith without deeds. It's not really possible. And I'll show you my faith by my deeds. He's just saying, if we believe, it's going to be apparent and visible. He continues in verse 19. He says, you believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that. And they shudder. Again, when the demons encountered Jesus, did they know who he was? You better believe it. Do you want to be on Team Demon? Because they know exactly who he is, but they don't do anything about it. That's kind of what James is setting up here. It's like, okay, yeah, you're acting just like the demons here. You do whatever you want to do, and you claim to know Jesus. You know who he is. You know his story. Great. But is it actually changing you? Is it actually changing your life? Verse 20, you foolish person. Do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? Again, go back to the story of Abraham. God asked Abraham, hey, I want you to give your son, your only son. Old Testament foreshadowing of the New Testament there. Wants him to give his only son. Abraham's like, oh, I don't understand this. Even in his words, he leaves his servants and he says, we will come back to you. The command is go kill your son. But he believes, he has faith. No, God's going to work this out somehow. And he is faithful until God goes, yep, I know. You haven't withheld anything from me. Go back. Abraham was considered righteous by what he did. He gives us another example. He says, you see that faith, where did I go? I skipped ahead, sorry. Look at verse 22. You see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that said, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. And again, that phrase right there made Martin Luther pucker a little bit because he had been so hammering on this idea that you're not going to earn your salvation. Could you pull that verse completely out of context to make it sound like you can earn your salvation? Sure. And that was a verse that the church in his time abused. Just because somebody abuses something and it makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. Again, it's easy to bash on somebody hundreds of years after the fact and go, oh, he should have known, right? His whole problem was you're not living the Bible. And yet when it came to this, he was like, I don't know. We all do the same thing though, don't we? When we read something, we're like, yeah, but... Again, we ought to have a faith that is visible, that acts upon, our life ought to act upon our faith. Put it that way. Look at verse 25. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? Again, what happened to Rahab? You guys remember that story in Jericho? The spies come in. She hides them, she helps them escape, and they indicate where she is so that when they come in and destroy the city, she would be saved. Because her faith had verbs. Now think back to what James originally asked. Can such faith save you? And he ends with the story of Rahab, and you're like, I guess it did kind of work out that way, didn't it? She was protected. Yep, she was protected. And everyone she brought in with her. Yep, she was protected. There's another story, again, that James isn't referencing, but think about the story of Jesus. You guys remember the lame man that's lowered down through the roof? Okay? This guy is laying on a mat and can't move. Does he have any verbs? Again, that sounds kind of cold-hearted, right? He's just laying there, right? But the text says Jesus saw their faith. They had verbs. He saw their faith, and because he saw their faith, he said, you're forgiven. Can such faith save you? In that case, yeah. So again, there's these little stories throughout Scripture that back this up, and James is writing this to a group of people that they've got their Bible memorized. When he just drops little nuggets here, you're going, oh yeah, I know that story. Sometimes we have to go back and remind ourselves of that story because we're just not as familiar with our Old Testament as we ought to be. So verse 26 wraps up this section. It says, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. Now, that stomps all over my toes. Because there's moments where I really know what I ought to do, and I go, I really don't want to do that. Yeah. And so in those moments, my faith doesn't have any action. My faith is dead. Yeah.
I was going to say, just reading the order of those, the Spirit is what animates us.
The Spirit is what animates us and gives us life.
Those are what our actions are.
And our life, it's exactly what our actions are. Our deeds are what our actions are, yeah. It's the animating part of our faith. Exactly right. And if it's not there, our faith is dead. So this is a part of James that again has been used and abused over the years to manipulate people into doing things. Yes. No, you're okay. Ooh. Yes. I would say it's a both and. Yeah. That, again, James started by saying when we face trials of many kinds, what is it? Is it temptation from God? It's a test. A test is an opportunity to show where we are in our walk, where we've grown. So, in some ways, acting on our faith is God seeing, hey, good job. See that? Well done, good and faithful servant. Why were they told that? Because they did something with what they were given. At the same time, though, it's also a witness. Jesus says, let your good deeds be done so that others will see you and glorify your Father in heaven. Again, there's an active component to our faith, to our walk with Jesus, and it should lead other people to see that as well. Not for us to get the glory and the attention and pat ourselves on the back, but it's like, why would you do this? Well, let me tell you about why I would do this. It gives us the opportunity. Yeah. I am glad I'm not the gatekeeper to heaven. I really am. I will tell you this. We serve a good, loving, and faithful God who is slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. Shows mercy, unbelievable mercy, way more mercy than I do. He's going to do the right thing in that situation. He's going to let the right people in. I sometimes think that we'll be surprised who's there. And we might be surprised who's not there sometimes. But again, I'm glad I don't have to make that call. Good question, though. Very good question, though. All right, so we've got, yes, go right ahead.
So was the church back in James' day, were they saying that works or deeds without faith?
Ooh, wow. Man, you have opened up like the Grand Canyon of rabbit trails here. This is fantastic. So there was this very common teaching probably about 30 to 40 years ago that kind of became the standard, saying that the Jewish faith in Jesus' day was a works-based faith. Jews believed they could work their way to heaven. Jesus came through and said, no, you have to have grace. Anybody ever heard anything kind of like that? Okay. What we know by reading their writings is they didn't believe that. And so there's this whole movement called this New Perspective. If you Google theology, New Perspective, you'll be able to get a summary of it. But it's this idea and it's this understanding that nobody believed that they earned their salvation. What started happening was people started turning inwards and saying, look how good I am by what I do. Well, where's the focus supposed to be? Is it supposed to be on us, or is it supposed to be on others? And so the Pharisees, the Sadducees would live out their faith in a way, again, not to glorify God in heaven and not to try to reach other people, but it was this, look how great I am. Remember when Jesus sees the two people praying and the one guy's going, I'm so glad you didn't make me like all these heathens. Oh God, you blessed the world through me. Oh, I'm so glad. And you got this other person going, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus goes, that's it. It's kind of that idea. And what James is saying here is not, hey, build yourself up by how much you do and how great you are. He's saying you're broken. You're saved by faith. But that saving faith is an active faith. It's not to tuck away in your wallet and look at every now and again. It's out there acting every single day. Hope that answers your question. Yeah, there's a grand canyon of stuff we could cover right there.
I kind of see the whole thing as like, if you truly love Jesus and you follow him, like the way he says to follow him, I feel like the words come not as like a duty, but more of like a child has the utmost respect for his dad. So he sees his dad doing something, and that kid like mimics it. And it's not because like the kid is trying to make himself good. He's literally just following his father because he loves his father.
Because he loves his father. Yeah. Boy, you put that, I wish I had that thought earlier today. If we get there, I'm going to wrap up class with a verse of Jesus, and you just put a different verse of Jesus in my head. I'm like, oh, that's so much better. Yeah. Think about this for just a minute. Jesus said, if you love me, and this is in John's gospel. I don't know why my brain didn't go to John, because I've been reading John a lot lately. If you love me, you will do what I'm asking you to do, right? You'll obey. Think about it this way. If you're married, hopefully this rings true, okay? Don't look at your spouse while I'm saying this and go, okay? Imagine being married to somebody, and you're married to that person, but you act like they don't exist. You make decisions without consulting them. You do whatever you want to do. You don't talk to them. You don't interact with them. You don't do anything they ask you to do. Can you look at that marriage and go, that's a loving relationship? However, a loving marriage, if you talk to one another and you communicate with one another and you learn about one another and you learn that this part likes this, so guess what? I'm going to do that sometimes to show my love for that person, right? I don't buy flowers for my wife every day, but I know that she likes it, and so every now and again, I buy her flowers. If I knew she liked flowers and I went, okay. If I knew she was sick and needed help and I went, nobody would look at me and go, wow, you're loving your life. No. If I love somebody, I'm going to do something. And Jesus points right out to it in John's gospel especially. If you love me, you will obey my commands. Good point on that. Thank you. All right, we got a couple discussion questions here. Faith and action. Again, James asks whether faith without works can save. The implied answer is, not really. How would you explain the relationship between faith and works to somebody who thinks Christianity is either belief only or good deeds only? How would you put that into your own words? Let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. All right, how would you explain that relationship between faith, belief only, or good deeds only? How would you explain that relationship? It is hard, yeah.
I just always picture the word faith, like F-A-I-T-H, with the letters stacked on top of each other, and the H has feet. So faith has feet, and in order to follow, pick up our cross and follow Christ, that we have to have feet to move toward and with him.
I like that. And she was talking about looking at the word faith kind of stacked vertically, and the bottom letter is H. It looks like it has feet. I need to follow him. I need to walk with him. I need to, P.S. those are all verbs, right? Yeah, we need to have verbs with that. Good. I like that. How would you explain that to somebody who says, well, I believe. I don't have to do anything. Or, well, I do enough good stuff. I think I'm all right. I don't have to believe. They're both dead, right? Yeah. Again, I'm not playing gatekeeper to heaven, okay? Do you think Adolf Hitler ever did anything good in his life? Do you think he ever held the door for his grandmother or something, right? You know, okay. Would we ever look at him and go, that guy had a really good faith? No, probably not. Right? But again, we wouldn't look at that. Why? Because his deeds don't bear that out, right? Now again, I'm not in his brain. I don't have any idea what he believed about himself, but I think if he would go, yeah, I'm a Christian, you'd look at his wife and go, I don't think so. Belief only? Probably not, right? Good deeds only. You know, I think that one we struggle with a little bit more sometimes, where we'll look at somebody, I don't know, a really wealthy person that does some really nice things and drops some money here and there and builds a hospital here and there, and we're like, oh man, that's a really good guy. You have no idea what they're doing on the side. You have no idea. Do they believe? I don't know. Again, if I got enough money, can I buy my way into heaven? It's kind of what the rich man thought, right? Rich man and Lazarus? I don't know. Yeah.
So maybe, I'm a very visual person, so maybe it's two halves of a heart that come together to make it whole.
Two halves of a heart that come together to make it whole. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, your illustration, Ryan, earlier of love, right? If somebody loves you, they're going to want to be with you. They're going to want to do what you're doing. They're going to want to follow you. You know, I love that illustration. And I didn't think of any of that until you brought that up. I was like, oh, gold mine. Steal it when you got it, right? Yeah. Thank you for teeing that one up for me. Next question. Question is about words versus deeds. James gives the example of wishing someone well without meeting their physical needs. Where are we most tempted to substitute good intentions or kind words for real action? And what might faithful action look like in those situations? So where are you tempted to just say words instead of actually doing something? And what might it look like to actually do something? Let's talk about that for a minute. All right, talking words versus deeds. Where are we tempted to just do words and good intentions instead of actual action? And what might it look like to do the actual action? What's some examples where you'd rather just talk instead of actually do? Yes.
This is something that I see online a lot. People asking for prayer,
People asking for prayer.
and all of the responses are praying.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes we might be tempted to just post that we're praying and never actually pray.
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, what I like to do is just post to them what I'm actually praying for them, praying over them.
Yeah.
So that they're encouraged by people actually praying, knowing that.
That's a good one. How often do we tell people we're going to pray and then promptly forget to pray? Yeah, and so like Tawana was saying, especially online, just don't tell them you're praying. Type out a prayer. Well, now you've done it, right? I do well at that sometimes. Other times I fail at that. But I've got a good friend who's just an expert at it. And somebody says, pray for me. Hey, please be praying. He'll just stop right there and pray. Right in the middle of whatever he's doing, just stop and let's do that, Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a really good one. Others, sometimes where you're just tempted to say words instead of actually acting and what might look like to act. Yeah. If you need anything, let me know, instead of saying, what can I do? Yep. Yeah. That's guilty. Thanks for stomping on my toe, Mark. I appreciate that. Yeah. Others. That's a big one, right? How often do we stand around and say, again, not a particular one, but how often do we say, man, somebody ought to do something about that? I'll tell on myself. I had this incident today. I was at a grocery store that had a little bit extra ice in the parking lot. And I was in a hurry to get back to my car. My kids were in the car, and so I need to get back there. And I'm walking across the parking lot, and out of the corner of my eye, I see one of those like mobility scooter things. And I didn't see it moving. And I didn't stop to go, that's unusual. I wonder if they're stuck. It didn't occur to me until I actually walked past it. Turns out they were stuck, and somebody walking by went, hey, are you stuck? I had the thought, and by the time it finally caught up with me, somebody else was already acting. So again, I should have seen it and gone, I really need to do something about that. But I got 6 or 7 steps down before I went, okay, somebody already did it. So I'm glad it happened, but I had the thought, but the thought didn't translate into action at that moment. So shame on me. Others. It's a real thing that we can run into where, again, I can talk about it all day long, but am I actually going to do something about it? Yeah.
Maybe like things that we say to our kids and do something, and we're like, yeah, we'll do that after this, after this, after this. We just keep putting it off and never really getting into action.
Yeah, when you're talking to people, it's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we should do something about it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Especially with kids, right? What can I tell this child right now to get them to stop? Right? Yeah, let's talk about that next week. Yeah, again, we need to back it up. If we actually have faith, we need to do something about it. Biblical examples of, did I skip one? I think I skipped one. I did skip one. Faith by itself is dead. Faith by itself is dead, James says, to paraphrase him. James uses strong language to describe that. So why do you think James is so direct here? Why is he not pulling any punches? Why isn't he trying to sugarcoat this at all? Why is he so direct? And how does this challenge comfortable or culturally acceptable versions of faith? Why is James so direct, and how does this challenge what a lot of people assume is faith? Let's talk about that one for a minute. All right, we're going to jump back in just for time's sake. I was having a conversation with Lorelei back there, and she said, I think he's blunt because it was actually a problem. Like they were actually struggling with that. Again, if I'm being theoretical about something that's not really an issue, I can gently work my way into it. But if you're doing something stupid and I need you to stop, right? If you're getting ready to walk out in front of a car, let's not go, you know what happens when something big and fast hits you when you're not expecting? No, I need, stop it! Sorry, I just thought about a skit. There's a skit out there, Bob Newhart. Anybody remember Bob Newhart? Yeah, he's supposed to be some high-paid therapist, and this woman walks in and goes, well, I keep having this problem. He goes, okay, stop it! Just keeps yelling at her like that's it, you know, stop it. She's like, well, I kind of like that. Stop it! Okay. I think James is doing that. He's being blunt because he needs to get that answer done. He needs them to actually do this. It's a real problem, so let's really address it. What else? What else did we come up with? Yes?
I think that faith by itself is selfish. If we have faith, let's just use the prayer thing for an example. If we have faith to pray for someone, but we don't pray for them, then that is a very selfish thing because we have the ability, we have the faith to be able to pray for them, but we're not doing it. We're not introducing people to Christ. We're not inviting them into the family. We're not giving them that opportunity to come into the fold.
So faith by itself is kind of selfish of us, right? If I say to somebody, hey, I'm going to pray for you, and then we don't do it, what have we just said? Your need is not as important as my comfort. Your need is not as important as what I want. Yeah, oof. Yikes. Yeah, Mark.
James might have been blunt because he lived that.
He might be blunt because he lived that way. Yeah.
He saw what faith and deeds were with his brother
Yeah.
and didn't believe that at an early age, right? It took a while to believe that was it. I think that's why he was blunt because he actually lived that.
Yeah, James growing up with Jesus, do you think he got to see Jesus actually act on a faith? Yeah, I think that, yeah, good point. Yeah, James.
I think that he knew how clearly that line had to be defined of recognizing, the fruit and recognizing the Spirit's evidence. It's like, hey, look, here, yeah, this one says it looks good, but where's the fruit? Because no bad tree bears good fruit, no good tree bears bad.
Isn't it interesting that you're quoting the Sermon on the Mount to describe what James is talking about here?
Matthew 17.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come back to Matthew 7. I actually put it in the slide because I remember. I drive my wife nuts by going, would you please help me remember? She's like, no. But me just saying it helps me remember, so yeah.
Well, it says have this as challenge comfortable or culturally accepted versions of faith. Would that be like the same as somebody saying that they're not religious but they're spiritual?
Not religious, but I'm spiritual, right? I don't want to have to act on it. I want to do what I want to do and just, yeah.
Yeah, it's only themselves accountable or whatever they believe, but not really like
Yeah, and saying true faith in Jesus requires this. Well, I just want to, yeah, that can not sit well with what we sometimes say. I thought better of that one. We'll move on. I was going to point out a kind of a pointed example, but nah. Time. Gosh. Why can't we have like a 3-hour Wednesday night? Okay. Donnie, go to the next one, please. Biblical examples of living faith. James points to Abraham and Rahab as examples of faith expressed through action. Again, he talks about Abraham. He's created by righteousness. Think about Rahab. She acts. She saves the spies. And she is saved. So what do these two very different stories teach us about what genuine faith looks like? And why do you think James includes both of them? Let's just kind of kick this around here without doing the small group just for time. Why do you think, again, they're drastically different, right? You've got Abraham, a great man of faith who leaves everything, and you've got a prostitute. Those are two very different. Why does he include both of them, and what does it teach us about faith? Donnie? it's an all walks of life kind of thing, right? It's universally applicable here. It doesn't matter what their background was. It's both based on their acting in faith. They believe something, they act on it. It's broadly applicable. Yeah. Others? Same thing, right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Other thoughts? Yep.
Those two, that's what I talked about earlier. They wouldn't baptize, were they? So he knew what he wanted with them.
Yeah, so that's a broad question there. And man, we've got 3 minutes left. That I'm gonna put a pin in that. We're gonna come back to that, okay? There's a whole discussion about baptism in the Old Testament that needs to be done, and I cannot even begin to do justice on it in the 3 minutes we have. Yeah.
I was going to say, Abraham heard straight from God.
Abraham heard straight from God.
Rahab heard through his servant.
Rahab heard through his servants. Very different, yet what did both of them do? Believe. Again, how often have you thought, man, if only Jesus was here, then I could... He's already told you. 2 examples right there. Let's go to the last one real quick. Belief versus trust. James notes that even the demons believe, but they don't trust God, do they? They don't do what he's calling them to do. So what's the difference between intellectual belief and trusting faith, and how can that difference show up in daily life? In other words, what can separate us from the demons here? The only thing that can separate us is acting on it, right? I know who Jesus is. Great. What are you doing about it? All right? Demons know exactly who he is. I know who you are. It's exactly what the demon said. Great. What are you doing about it? Nothing good. Yeah.
When the demons came out, when he went across the river and the guy came out, and he said they knew right away who it was.
They knew exactly who he was.
But here's my question. I was told the reason that they went to the hogs, that they didn't want to leave that area. And if the hogs grounded, they would stay in that area.
That is a theory that's out there, absolutely. And that gets into a whole thing of geographical deity stuff, which again is a great 3-hour discussion to have on another Wednesday night. Eddie, catch me after service because I want to address both of those next week. All right, so to wrap up here, here's what I want us to do. I want us to look back at James's last verse, his summary statement, in verse 26. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. To put it another way, genuine faith is proven not by what we claim to believe, but by obedient actions that naturally follow from trusting God. Again, not what we claim. If we're truly obeying Jesus, we're going to do what he says, which I don't know why I didn't think about that when I wrote that line, but like Ryan mentioned earlier, and I stuck it in here. Next slide, please, sir. Should be from John. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. Genuine faith. Go back real quick, Donnie. Nope. Genuine faith is proven not by what we claim to believe, but by obedient actions that naturally flow from trusting God. If we trust God, we're going to do what he says, and therefore our faith has verbs. I put in there Matthew 7. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine, as Jesus is wrapping up his Sermon on the Mount, and puts them into practice. He didn't want them just to hear, he wanted them to do and put them into practice. And then as Ryan mentioned earlier from John chapter 14 and verse 15, if you love me, keep my commands. If you truly love me, you're going to do something about it. All right, last thing was Matthew chapter 17. If you turn over there real quick, in Matthew chapter 17, probably, depending on what translation of the Bible you have, you're going to scroll down and you're going to find verse 21. Or you won't. Verse 21 might be there, or there might be a footnote about verse 21. And I had this question earlier today, and when I have questions, I really do want to address them in class, so here's what we're going to do. Very succinctly, in 1611, when your King James translators translated their Bible, they used the best manuscripts that they had available. They are not the best manuscripts that we have available. Archaeology, historiology, trying to categorize these things, it's an ever-evolving situation. We find new manuscripts that are not new, that are old every single year. It's amazing what people dig up in libraries that have been long lost and forgotten. It's amazing what people actually dig out of the ground that we can still access, hidden in caves and deserts and stuff like that. What happens with verse 21 is that when you look at the oldest manuscripts that we have today, and you look at the majority of manuscripts we have today of Matthew's Gospel, that verse isn't there. There are some manuscripts that have that verse. And so your Bible has about a dozen spots, about a dozen examples of that. And it's not missing from your Bible. It's mentioned in your Bible. It's down in the footnotes. Again, I've got one edition that actually has the text of verse 21 there. The one I have sitting here on the table says, hey, P.S., some manuscripts have something similar to, I think it's Mark 929 if I'm doing it off the top of my head, 929. Hey, go look over there, and some manuscripts have that exact language. So it's not hidden from you. It's not there. It's just that the newer publications of the Bible are really trying to get what did Matthew actually at some point. All of that on Matthew chapter 18 in my Bible, I have Matthew chapter 18 and verse 14. It says, in the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any one of these little ones should perish. Then there's a paragraph break. And then verse 15 says, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. So Jesus says, God doesn't want sin to cause a problem. The next verse, so if you see sin, go and point it out. And I wrote the note in between the two, this is why we don't ignore sin. Now, I'm not going to say it's possible now, but let's turn back the clock, I don't know, 1,500 years. And I personally put that note in my manuscript. Is it possible that somebody later could come along and copy that and think that was the words of Jesus? In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. This is why we don't ignore sin. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. So I took my words in the margin that's written kind of right between the two in the paragraph break and read them as if they were the words of Jesus. And guess what happened? Over the years, sometimes that happened. It's not a bad statement. It's not an ungodly statement. It's not a you shouldn't say that statement. It's a, hey, we don't think Matthew actually put that there. It's good. We're going to put it down in the footnotes. That's why you run into those sometimes. It's not a conspiracy to remove verses that will save you and lead you astray. We're trying to get back to what the original manuscripts had. Okay, I answered that question. That came in right at dinner time. I wanted to address that before we got out of here. Thanks for being here. God bless you. Slide home safely. Drive home safely. And Lord willing, we'll see you on Sunday.